In 1990, three people from the Artificial Intelligence Lab at MIT started a company and called it iRobotics. Colin Angle, Helen Greiner, and Rodney Brooks. Brooks was the professor, the one who had spent years arguing that a robot's intelligence had to come from how it moved through the real world, rather than from some model of the world built inside a computer. Angle and Greiner had studied under him. The idea they left the lab with was simple to say and very hard to do. They wanted to build robots that were practical, robots that did something. For the first 12 years, that meant almost nothing that a normal person would ever see. There was no consumer market for robots, and the investors they approached did not believe there would be one. Angle has said that venture capitalists would, in his words, laugh them out of the room. So the company survived the way a lot of hard science startups survived in those years, which was on government money. Between 1990 and 2002, they won a string of small research grants from military and defense agencies, a few $1 million in total, enough to keep the lights on and keep building. They designed a robot to help search the inside of the Great Pyramid. They took a DARPA contract in 1998 that produced the PackBot, a rugged tracked machine that could be thrown through a window or sent down a tunnel. The PackBot went to war. After the attacks in 2001, it was deployed at Ground Zero, and then it went to Iraq and Afghanistan, where soldiers used it to approach roadside bombs so that a person would not have to. In the lobby of the company's headquarters, they kept one of these robots on display, a battered unit that soldiers had nicknamed Scooby-Doo, its shell marked with a tally of every explosive it had handled before an explosion finally destroyed it. The troops who had worked with it retrieved the pieces and, according to Angle, treated it a little like a fallen comrade. That was the company's origin. Not a vacuum, a bomb disposal robot with a name. Somewhere in there, in 2000, they renamed the company iRobot after the Isaac Asimov book. And in September of 2002, they released the thing that everyone remembers, the Roomba, a flat disk that drove itself around a room and picked up dirt. It was not sophisticated. It bumped into furniture and changed direction. It did not map the house or think about where it had been. It cost a fraction of what a robot was supposed to cost, and it did one useful thing reliably, and that turned out to be enough. They sold 1 million of them within about 2 years. In 2005, the company went public on the NASDAQ under the ticker IRBT. For most of the next 15 years, iRobot was the robot company that ordinary people had actually met. If you had ever seen a real robot working in a real home, it was almost certainly theirs. They sold more than 50 million of them over the life of the product. They added the Brava, which mopped. They added Alexa compatibility in 2017, so you could tell the vacuum to start from across the house. At the peak, during the pandemic, when people were stuck at home and buying things for their homes, the company was worth around $3.5 billion. It held something like 42% of the robotic vacuum market in the United States and 65% in Japan. It looked, for a while, like the clear winner of a category it had invented. The category it had invented did not stay its own. Companies in China, Roborock and Ecovacs and others started making robotic vacuums that were not just cheaper, but in many cases better. They had LiDAR navigation that actually mapped the room. They emptied themselves into a bin at the base. They mopped and vacuumed in the same pass. They arrived at prices iRobot could not match because iRobot was carrying the cost structure of an American company that designed its hardware in Massachusetts, and its competitors were not. The Roomba had been the affordable robot that did one thing well. Now it was the expensive robot that did fewer things than the alternatives. If you're trying to choose a robot vacuum in a market this crowded, my vacuum buying guide in the description walks you through what to actually look for. This is the point where the Amazon deal enters the story, and the Amazon deal is where the ending was written, even though it took a few more years to arrive. In August of 2022, Amazon announced that it would buy iRobot. The figure was around $1.5 to $1.7 billion, and for a company that was already feeling the pressure from below, it was a lifeline. Amazon had the money to refinance iRobot's debt and fund the research that might let it catch up. iRobot took on new borrowing in anticipation of the deal closing, bridge loans that made sense only if the cash from Amazon was coming. The cash did not come. Regulators in the United States and in Europe spent about 18 months examining the acquisition. The concern, particularly from the European Commission, was that Amazon sells vacuums on its own marketplace and controls how products are ranked and displayed there, and that owning the largest robotic vacuum maker would give it both the motive and the means to disadvantage everyone else. In January of 2024, the two companies gave up. Amazon walked away and paid iRobot a breakup fee of $94 million, which sounds like a lot until you set it against what iRobot had borrowed and what it had lost by betting on the deal. What followed came quickly. iRobot cut about a third of its staff. It suspended research and development. Colin Angle, who had run the company since he helped start it 34 years earlier, stepped down as chief executive and as chairman. A company that had ended 2023 with more than 1,000 employees ended 2024 with 541. The strategy that replaced growth was survival, and it had a name that told you everything about the situation, which was asset light. The plan was to stop doing expensive things in expensive places and to hand more and more of the actual making of the robots to a contract manufacturer. That manufacturer was a Chinese supplier called Pisia. Remember that name. The 2024 numbers, when they came out in early 2025, were bad in a way that was hard to spin. Revenue of $682 million, down 23% in a single year. A net loss of $145 million. And in the filing, the language that public companies use when they are required by law to tell you they might not make it. Substantial doubt about the ability to continue as a going concern. The stock fell 35% in a day and dropped below $10. Management said it would explore strategic alternatives, which is the phrase a company uses when it is looking for someone to rescue it or buy it. Then the tariffs. Most of iRobot's vacuums sold in the United States were manufactured in Vietnam, and in 2025, the new tariff policy put a rate as high as 46% on goods coming from there. That added around $23 million in cost to a company that did not have $23 million to spare. By the third quarter of 2025, revenue had fallen 44% from the year before, down to $172 million. Sales were down 47% in the United States, 34% in Japan, 44% across Europe and the surrounding region. The quarterly loss widened to just over $77 million. Cash on hand had dropped below $25 million. A credit monitoring firm had the company rated at its highest risk level since the summer. The debts tell the plainest version of what had happened. iRobot owed roughly $100 million to Pisia, the manufacturer it had leaned on under the asset-light plan. It owed a few million to BYD, the Chinese electric vehicle giant. And it owed several million to United States Customs in tariffs it had not paid. The company that had been laughed out of venture capital offices in the 1990s and had survived on grant money and had gone on to put 50 million robots into people's homes, now owed its largest single debt to the Chinese supplier that had been building those robots for it. On the 14th of December 2025, iRobot filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in Delaware. It was a pre-packaged filing, which means the outcome had been negotiated before the papers were submitted. Under the terms, Pisia, which was both the largest creditor and the contract manufacturer, would take 100% ownership of the company. The existing shareholders, everyone who had held the stock, would receive nothing. The stock was delisted from the Nasdaq on the 22nd of December. The process is expected to complete in February of 2026, and iRobot will continue as a private company owned by a Chinese firm still selling Roombas, which are expected to keep working normally through all of it. If you own one and want it to last, my maintenance guide linked below covers the upkeep that keeps a Roomba running for years. Colin Angle heard about the bankruptcy the same weekend as everyone else. He had left the board about 2 years earlier and, by his own account, had no real knowledge of the company's strategy in its final stretch. He called the outcome profoundly disappointing and said it was, for consumers, a tragedy. His view was that the regulators who blocked the Amazon deal had, in trying to protect competition, removed the one thing that might have kept iRobot competitive, and that his company's collapse should serve as a warning. Amazon's chief executive, Andy Jassy, had said something similar when the deal died, calling the whole thing a sad story. Whether they are right or whether iRobot was already too far behind the companies making cheaper and better machines to be saved by anyone is a question that the bankruptcy does not answer. What the bankruptcy settled was ownership. The company that invented the home robot is now owned by the factory in China that had been building it.